Judicial Watch announced that it is settling a federal election integrity lawsuit against the Board of Elections in New York City. It all started when the foundation filed a lawsuit against the city for failing to clean up its voter rolls. The lawsuit pointed out that New York City removed only 22 names from voter rolls over 6 years, even though the city has close to 6 million voters. As part of the settlement, the city removed over 441,000 ineligible names from the voter rolls. These are people that have either died or moved away. The city also promised to track its voter roll maintenance efforts through 2025. Judicial Watch has been waging this legal battle in a number of different states. Kentucky, Maryland, North Carolina, Illinois, and California also settled similar lawsuits to clean up voter rolls. For example, California now claims it is supposedly removing 1.6 million inactive names from Los Angeles County's voter rolls. Let's bring in Tom Fenton, the president of Judicial Watch. Tom, good to see you again, and congratulations on yet another win.
Yeah, it was a good victory for election integrity. Last year we warned them. We said, we've looked at the material you're sending to the federal government, and you're not removing these names. And what they did was, just before what they thought was the deadline, they removed, as we noted, 440,000 names. We sued, and they said, look, we removed these names after, we warned them. And so said, that's good. And let's make sure you keep on cleaning the lists. And it's amazing how even in these blue states, you can get good results for election integrity if you stick with the facts and highlight that the law requires, this is federal law, requires the states to take reasonable steps to clean up the rolls. It's especially important these days because however objectionable it may be to many of us and just a bad policy, we are doing obviously more vote by mail, and the least we can do is to make sure the rolls are clean before we send the ballots out or start taking requests from voters who we haven't heard from in 10 years.
Yeah, when we talk with others about election integrity and measures that need to be taken, they always are clear to say, look, you can do all kinds of measures, but until the voter rolls are cleaned up, that won't really matter. So clearly this is big, especially in New York. This is big. With 440,000 names being removed, Tom, do you think that's adequate? Or had you all assessed it really should have been more? How do you feel about the number?
I mean, you can always argue on the margins. The law requires them to take reasonable steps to clean up the rolls, and that's a big chunk of names. It happened also in North Carolina. We sued. They ended up removing hundreds of thousands of names. So, we got what we wanted and we ended the lawsuit. So, it's hard to keep fighting when they do what you ask, right? And, the law is that they have to remove the names, and if they're doing it, well, good, and the important thing to note is the Justice Department isn't doing this enforcement. It's Judicial Watch. You talked about the California case. You talked about Kentucky. We have ongoing litigation in Pennsylvania, in Colorado, in California. Those names, it looks like we'll get a full report as to what they did later this year. But if we hadn't done anything in California generally, they hadn't cleaned the rolls for 20 years till we got involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And Pennsylvania and Colorado are key states. There are two states that those concerned about elections particularly highlight. So you have ongoing cases with them. Do you expect any kind of settlement or movement from those two states anytime soon?
I hope that things work out in Pennsylvania. I suspect they will. Colorado, we'll see. It's been a much more vigorous battle from Colorado. But the good news when you get these settlements in California, a consent decree in Kentucky, North Carolina, and in some cases in Pennsylvania, for instance, there was one county where we warned and they immediately took off 69,000 names. So we didn't even have to sue. So we're getting there, but it requires vigilance, and a lot of states won't do anything until they're pressed. And what's interesting here is that New York City is not the place you think would be amenable to settling with Judicial Watch, but they did, to their credit. And to me, it ought not to be a big deal to follow the law. I mean, typically this is what the federal law requires. If you don't vote in a federal election, they're supposed to ask where are you, right? And if you don't respond or otherwise vote in the next two federal election cycles, so you're talking maybe as long as 5 years, practically speaking, they should take your names off the rolls. And the fact that we have to sue to get that enforced, and by the way, the left doesn't want that enforced, I think speaks volumes.
It does, but like you said, at least doing it, you're able to get some action. Sometimes it's just that people don't do the work to enforce it. Real quick, we got about 30 seconds, and while you're here, I have to ask you, since you've been so involved in accountability with the FBI, and you're so you're so deeply connected in DC, just your quick thoughts on the speaker race, and if you think that if Kevin McCarthy is ultimately elected speaker, there will be accountability for institutions like the FBI and the Department of Justice.
Well, unfortunately, I don't think it matters who's going to be speaker. I don't think the House and the establishment in this town in large numbers are willing to do what it takes to hold these agencies accountable. Millions of people censored and suppressed. I mean, you're a victim, obviously. Judicial Watch has been victimized, but there are millions of folks who don't have the voices we do, who are having their content censored right now by the federal government. And it needs to be a priority. And the question is the House Republican majority committed to addressing this censorship crisis, let alone the other corruption crises we're facing with the Justice Department trying to jail people that are on the wrong side of the political divide, simply because they are on the wrong side of the political divide, not that they did anything wrong. I just don't see it happening. And I would say, even if one of our quote friends became speaker, it would be a very difficult haul to get the direct accountability. But who knows? Maybe this fight will focus their energies on what the base is more concerned about than otherwise would have been if the fight hadn't taken place.